Side 5, The Broken Bubble by Philip K. Dick. Continuing on page 158. "I don't get a chance to do this," she said. "How many times in my life can I loll around like this? I don't have to work today. I can't go to work with my eye the way it is. Suppose somebody comes." She shrugged. "Suppose they do. You can answer the door. Suppose Jim Briskin shows up." "Oh," she said, eyeing him. "Does that worry you?" "I don't like it." "What do you want me to put on? Do you want me to dress up? Are we going somewhere?" He seated himself across from her and began to eat. The smell of bacon made her ill, but she remained at the table. Smoke from her cigarette drifted around him. Turning his chair, he ate with his plate between his knees. "That's no way to eat," she said. "Go to hell," he mumbled, his mouth full, his face flushed. "Didn't your mother teach you how to act at the table? Does Rachel let you eat that way? There's so many things you're going to have to learn. What about your clothes? You can't wear those again today. Don't you have anything else you can wear?" "They're home." "Then buy some more, or go get them." Lazily, she leaned back, her arm over the top of the chair. "Why don't you take the car and go by your place and pick up your clothes? And you need a shave." Reaching, she touched his chin. He ducked away. "It's true. You can't go out like that." Throwing down his fork, he left the table. She went into the bedroom and finished dressing. When she came back out, he was standing at the living room window, his hands in the back pockets of his slacks. The crease was gone from the slacks, and they hung unevenly, bagging at the knees. All night his clothes had been piled up on the chair. "How do you like this skirt?" she said. She had put on a bright blue skirt and a white frilly blouse. He said nothing. He did not look. "I thought I'd go downtown and shop," she said. "If I'm not going to have to go to work, there are some clothes I want to buy. I have a list of errands." "How about your eye?" "It's improving." She went to the basin in the bathroom and splashed cold water on it. The skin was discolored, but it was not as hard, not as distended. "You can't go outside looking like that," he said at the bathroom door. "You look awful." "Okay," she said. "We'll stay here then." "I'm not sticking around here," he said vehemently. "I can't stand just sitting around. Anyhow, I have to get over to Larson's. I'm supposed to be there every day." "All right," she said. "You do that. I'll stay here and catch up on my letter writing." As an afterthought, she added, "There's another thing you probably should do." "What?" "Shouldn't you call Rachel and tell her you're okay? She's probably worried about you." Art said, "Let's go away." "Go away? With you?" He gave her a deadly, impassioned look. Sobered, she said, "What do you mean? For how long?" "Let's just go." "My job," she said. "The hell with your job. Pack your stuff up and let's go." "Do you have any money?" "No," he said. "Then," she said, "how can we go away?" Now she felt more secure. "And I don't have any money. If you want, you can look around. Look in my purse if you care to." "You can sell your car." "No, I can't." The presumption shocked her, the absolute disregard of her interests. "I don't have the pink slip. I still owe $1,800 on it. I won't own it until May 1958. "You can borrow on it." He seemed to have made up his mind. Dealing her possessions out, she thought. "Why do you want to go away?" she asked, unable to follow the process involved. Impulsive, she thought. It was a boy's whim. But the coolness was shocking. The assumptions. Art said, "Somebody might come here." "Like who?" "Jim Briskin." "Why does Jim Briskin worry you?" "Because," he said in his brusque, unreasoning voice, "you're his girl." He made her pack all her things, her clothes from the closet, medicine from the bathroom, the cosmetics from her vanity table in the bedroom, the slips and bras and underpants and stockings and sweaters and blouses from the dresser drawers. As fast as he could, he carried everything to the bed, on which her suitcases rested end to end, one of them already full, the next half full. Whenever she looked up, There he was with more things. No limit, she thought. How systematic he was, and, she thought, in the face of this flow she drifted along. She was captured and held fast. "What else?" he demanded. "There's enough here already," she said. "I don't really need all this." He said, "I don't know what you need. Let's not take it. Take what you need." "If you won't tell me where we're going or how long we'll be gone, I can't tell what I need. Isn't that so?" But his mind was on the car. People sell cars they don't own. You can get something out of it. Picking up the telephone, he called a number. As she packed, she listened to him. He was asking questions in monosyllables and grunts. She thought, if I'm not careful and do not keep some control, I will give him the car. I will let him take everything. "Who was that?" she said when he hung up. "Who did you call?" "My brother." "I didn't know you had a brother. Is he older than you?" "Yes," he said. The idea was ominous. A bigger, more formidable Art. The same, she thought. The same, but larger. "He says you can sell your equity," Art said. "How does he know?" "He has a used car lot." "It doesn't make any difference," she said. "I'm not going to part with my car." "How big's your equity?" She said, "You can forget it, Art. I have to have that car." From the heap which he had assembled on the bed, she separated towels. They would not need towels. "Once you get on something," she said, "you just go on and on. If you'll shut up about the car." She pretended not to see him. She carried the towels back to the dresser. "I have some money in a savings account." "How much?" "The passbook's in the drawer." She indicated the table. "I forget. Whatever it is, you can have it." He opened the passbook. $200, he said, pleased. "That'll do." "What are you going to do about clothes?" she asked. "Your own clothes." Reluctantly, he said, "What kind of clothes do I need?" "Don't you know? Good God, don't you buy your own clothes? Does she buy them for you?" His eyes on the floor, he said, "Socks, I guess." "Socks and shirts, and a suit of some kind, and underwear." Her voice was rising, and she remembered the trouble it had caused, the fights with Jim. She heard herself gain the acrimonious tone, the animation. And underneath it was something different, something that she did not recognize. "You're as helpless as a baby. Go out and go to some men's clothing store and tell them your stuff was destroyed, or it was all lost. Get a neutral suit, blue or brown or gray, single-breasted. Don't get any sport coats." "Why not?" "Because," she said, "sport coats make you look like a kid dressed up for Saturday night." He was attending, aware of her conviction. "Get a couple of sports shirts," she said, "and some plain white shirts." And then the yearning beneath the anger came out, and she said, "I'll go with you." "No," he said. But she had made up her mind. Going through her purse, she kept alive a running patter of talk. Her eagerness was working through her, and she could not shut it off. "Why should I stake you to an outfit? What kind of a thing is this? Am I supposed to buy your clothes and feed you and support you? Am I keeping you? Is that it? What am I supposed to be getting out of it?" He had no answer. He hung his head. "I'll tell you one thing," she said. "You're supposed to look out for a woman, not live off her. I even have to think for you. I have to tell you how to dress yourself and cross the street. How long do you think I'm going to put up with this? I think I've had just about enough. This really is something. You better take a good look at yourself." "Calm down," he said. But she could not calm down. "Do you know what's going to happen?" she said. "I'm the one who's going to have to suffer for all this. I'll lose my lease here. I'll probably lose my job. And Rachel's probably after me, and Jim Briskin, too. And I'll wind up borrowing on my car. I can't afford to do that, Art. I just can't. And that's the last of Bob Posen. You don't have to worry. If the police show up, it'll be me they'll arrest, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. God, you're just a child. You're like a baby, a little boy. My little boy." She swept past him, hurrying away from him so that she was not close enough to touch him. She did not trust herself so close to him. Going into the bedroom, she closed the door, stood for a moment, and then she thought, "What's gone wrong with me? What is it?" Taking off her skirt and blouse, she changed to a blue suit. She made herself up with more powder than usual. She obscured the discoloration around her eye. Then she put on stockings and heels and a white hat with a veil. That does it, she thought, except for the purse and gloves. She put her things into a dark leather purse, tugged on her gloves, and opened the door. Her muscles were so unresponsive that she thought some blight had fallen onto her. She was dominated by invisible fluids. As if the blight had made a passage into her nerve centers and had lodged there. "I don't think my eye will be too noticeable like this," she said. Art said, "You look like you're going to a wedding." "Do I?" Approaching him, she said, "What about my eye? How does it look?" "Not too bad. You can still see it." But she saw his admiration. She knew how good this suit was for her. She saw the response. "Jim likes this suit," she said. "You look okay," he said, and that was as much as he would say. Disappearing into the bathroom, he spent a long time with his hair. She waited, knowing that he was fixing himself up as best he could. Her suit made her feel superior. She was raised up, maintained. She went about the apartment, smoking, pausing to watch his progress. In this high state, she was lazy and at ease. Art, in the bathroom, labored at the mirror. She walked in to inspect his progress. The mirror gave back their combined reflection. How much larger he was than she. But, she thought, she looked good with him. She looked trim and tidy. This was a deep pleasure for her, and she made the most of it. She felt wealthy, expansive. Supervising him, she felt aristocratic. "You have to shave," she said. "With what?" Returning to the bedroom, she rested one of the suitcases on the chair arm. Opening it, she took out a plastic-wrapped package from a side pocket. "You can use mine." He was astonished to see a regular razor and blades. Beside the plastic package was a blue box. On its side were elegantly printed letters, and as he accepted the razor, he read the letters slowly, unbelievingly. On his face, the dismay was so great that she had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing. "What's wrong?" she said. No words were audible. He stared at the box. "Oh," she said innocently, "my diaphragm. I had that out the other night. Didn't you notice?" Still he said nothing. "No," she said. "I guess you didn't. I have to use it." She was curious. "Doesn't Rachel own a diaphragm?" "No." "Do you know what a diaphragm is?" His lips moved. "Sure." "She can get one now," she said, "now that she's married. She ought to have one. Tell her. What do you use instead?" Nothing." "She should use something. A diaphragm is the safest. She can go to a gynecologist and get herself fitted. They'll measure her, and then she can get it in any drugstore. This one belongs to me and Jim. I got it when we were married. By the California joint property laws, half of it is his." She was enjoying herself, and she pursued him back into the bathroom. His arms and face vanished under the spray of water in the bowl. His back to her, he began industriously to wash and lather himself. While he shaved, stripped down to his pants, she was leaning against the door jamb, her arms folded. The bathroom was steamy and warm, and she thought how much it was like some safe cavern. It was womb-like, isolated from the world. The noise of the water blanked out other sounds. The smell of lather filled her nose, the sweet, wet smell. "Jim shaves twice a day," she said. "His beard is heavy. It's like steel wires in the morning." "Do many men shave that often? I guess having to shave is really the worst of the two." "To what?" Washing his face, he began to dry himself. He buried his face in a towel. "You wouldn't want to know," she said, teasing him, playing with him. She walked nearer to him, and then all at once her delight vanished. In its place was lust. and she put her arms around his bare waist and clutched him as lightly as she could. She prevented herself from laying hold of him with her real devotion. "Watch it," he said, a little apprehensively. And then she thought, with clarity, that her ambition had been opened to him at last. At once she released him. Flustered and embarrassed, she retreated. "My child," she thought. Now he put his shirt back on and began to button it. A sullen boy, she thought, controlling her hunger, permitting the mere dreams, the desires and hallucinations to gallop through her mind. The scenes fled past, and she reviewed them. She identified them as old fantasies that had always been with her, but could never be acted out. She waited and remained placid until they subsided. But they were not gone. They would never be gone. "Maybe we ought to leave," Art said. She said, "I want you in the most awful kind of way. So maybe we should. Have you ever seen a woman with a new baby?" "That's not me," he said. "I won't hurt you," she said. "I just want to be close to you. I'll be careful. But at least let me buy your clothes for you." She wanted to dress him and comb his hair, but she kept her hands away from him. A great, expanding bloom of love and weakness loosed itself inside her. It detached itself from her and rose up. It hovered within her throat, and then it came forth in a muffled shriek. She walked hurriedly away from him, not wanting him to hear, but he was aware, in some dull fashion, so it made no difference. She could not conceal it from him, and anyhow, she thought, he did not care. "I don't expect you to give me what I want," she said. "You want a baby," he said knowingly. "That's what it is." "Don't hate me," she said, trying not to plead. But it did not matter what she did, because she was not going to be able to get what she wanted. He did not have it to give her. The suitcases were packed in the trunk compartment and in the back seat of the car. She shut off the gas in the kitchen of the apartment. She made certain that the faucets and lights were off and that the door was locked. "That does it," she said. They got into the car, and she watched the apartment house disappear behind them. They stopped at the bank and then at a men's clothing store on Market Street. When they left the clothing store, Art drove in the direction of the freeway. He paid no attention to her. He was involved in the driving. "South?" she asked. "Do you like it better down south?" Without answering, he made a left turn onto the freeway. Now they were above the houses and streets of the city. Everything was grimy, she thought, run down and dismal. "Art," she said, "I want to ask you something. If you weren't married, if you didn't have a wife and you weren't expecting a baby, and say you were a couple of years older and I was, say, 24 instead of 27, she turned to face him, but when it came down to it, she was unable to say it. "What?" he said. Struggling, she said, "Would you want to marry me?" Sure, he said. "I want to marry you now." "You can't, Art," she said. "Don't even think about it." "Why not?" "Art," she said, "you just make yourself more miserable." In that instant, she felt like crying. With effort, she said, "You can't leave Rachel. She's a wonderful person. She's a lot finer person than I am. I know that." "No," he said. "It's the truth. If I were anything at all, I wouldn't be here with you. I'd have broken it off after that first night. But I don't have the strength. I'm too weak, Art." And it was true, she thought. It really was true. She could not deny it. "It's just delaying it. Sooner or later, we have to break it off. I keep telling myself, we had to now, right now. I'm too old and you're too young, but we keep on going along. Someday, we'll have to pay for this." "No," he said. "Why do we have to stop?" "We'll want to. This isn't healthy or right. There's nothing really good between us." "I don't know," he said. He listened to her. He heard what she was saying, but he did not agree. Now, turning, he saw her lips, dark and full, moving close to his. She was rising toward him. Maybe it was true, he thought. Her lips tingled against his own. With her gloved hand, she touched his face, pressing her fingers to him avidly. Her nostrils flared. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the trembling beneath the layers of powder and lipstick. the quivering of her lips and chin. She smelled like raspberries, a hot, sweet smell, a sticky smell. Her veil was up. She had lifted it aside to kiss him. And the beautiful long legs, he thought. Nothing in this life was permanent. No sensation, not the most vivid nor the most meaningful. Not even this. She was right. The feel of them was gone already, and one day even the sight would be gone. And, he thought, someday, in a few decades, the legs themselves, the superb body, the arms and face and dark hair and waist would perish and vanish and become ashes. And he would not remember them because he would be dead too. All the intricate working parts would stop working. The joints would dissolve and the fluids would dry up, and it would be dust. Dust. He thought, if this could go, then anything could and would go. Nothing could be saved. Nothing survived. Where was all the talk, the music and fun and cars and places? Here went the greatest of the sensibilities. Here went civilization itself in its blue suit and veil and heels and matching person gloves. Thousands of years had gone into the forming of this object. The hell with the buildings and cities and documents and ideas, the armies and ships and societies. They had persons prepared to lament for them. He lamented this. He thought, I was out to get this as soon as I laid eyes on it. And I did get it. And I did have it. And it was every bit as good as I had imagined. In the vicinity of Redwood City, he left the freeway and crossed to El Camino Real. Near Menlo Park, at the side of the highway, was a motel. Why not here, he thought. Starting, Pat raised her head and looked out. Are you stopping? This looks like what we want, he said. A motel, she said, reading the sign. The Four Aces Motel. It looks clean, he said. I've never stayed at a motel. We always had the cabin if we wanted to go somewhere. How far is this from San Francisco? Around 20 miles, Art said. When he had brought the car up onto the gravel shoulder and had parked, she got out and looked back in the direction they had come. To the north was San Francisco, too far now to see, but nonetheless there. She felt its closeness. The line of office buildings, like two-dimensional cardboard cutouts, assembled and pasted up against the late afternoon haze. The air was dry and tasted of cinders. She sniffed. She inhaled the presence of trucks and cars, the skyborne wastes from factories. Into San Francisco went concrete ramps, the freeway system over which they had come. The ramps were high off the ground, elevated, remote. The cars whizzed along, and the lines of traffic divided, passed in various directions, passed under the black directional signs with letters as large as the cars themselves. To her, this sense of the city, this view of it, was disturbing, and at the same time exhilarating. To be here on the edge of the city, to be camped just outside, not in it, but beside it, close enough to enter if she wanted, far enough out so that she was away. She was free, on her own, not bound or contained by it. The trucks rumbled past, the huge diesel trucks. Under her feet, the pavement shook. Ah, she thought, breathing in the air. The freedom, the sense of motion, the trucks, the cars. Everything was on its way somewhere. Transition, she thought. There was nothing stable here, nothing fixed. She could be anything she wanted. This was the edge. 16. The blue pre-war Plymouth halted by the curb, and Ferda Heinke hopped out and ran up the path and down the stairs and knocked on the door of the basement apartment. A light was on behind the shade of the living-room window, and he knew either Rachel or Art was home. The door opened, and Rachel, looking wan and listless, said, "Hi, Heinke." Always shy in her presence, he scuffed his feet and said, "Let's say, is Art around?" "No," she said. "I sort of wanted to pick up the dummies." She did not appear to understand, so he explained, "The dummies for Phantasmagoria? They're around someplace. Art was working on them." "Oh," she said, "yes. He asked me to go over the spelling." She held the door open, and Ferda Heinke entered. "I'll get them." Ill at ease, he waited for her. The apartment had a deserted quality, a lack of life. While he was standing around, he realized that a man was sitting in the corner with his legs stuck out. A grown man in a suit. At first, he thought the man was asleep, and then he realized that the man was awake and looking at him. "Hi," Ferda Heinke murmured. The man said, "Hi, Ferda." Recognizing Jim Briskin, he said, "How are you?" "Not so good," Jim Briskin said, and that was all. Rachel appeared with the dummies. "Here," she said, giving them to Ferda. Her tone was so weighed down that he decided not to stay. He accepted the dummies for his science fiction magazine, thanked her, and went off up the steps to the path. Behind him, Rachel shut the door of the apartment. He continued along the path, past the iron gate to the car. At the wheel, Joe Mantilla said, "You didn't stay long, anyhow." "He wasn't home," Ferda said, getting into the car. They stopped at the lithograph shop, which was still open. The man behind the counter, fat and wearing suspenders and a colored shirt with the sleeves rolled up, inspected the dummies. His stubby fingers riffled the pages as Ferda Heinke and Joe Mantilla stood circumspectly a short distance away. "You want it folded and stapled, don't you?" The man scratched estimates with a ballpoint pen. "How many copies?" Ferda Heinke told him around 200, and the man wrote that down. He also wrote complicated figures about the number of pages, size of pages, and cryptic letters suggesting the weight of paper, the type of chemical process. "Can we go look at how it works?" Ferda asked, interested as always in seeing printing processes. "Sure," the man said, smoking a Malacrina cigarette. "Just keep out of the way." They wandered past the counter and saw the negatives of several dummies from local corporations, and then the actual photographing equipment. Next door was more interesting material. The Rube Goldberg folding and cutting machine was clanking away, and hundreds of pamphlets, all alike, were rattling down an inclined belt. The title of the pamphlet was "Tungsten in Time of War," and it was put out by a factory in South San Francisco. The pamphlets hung astraddle the moving belt, and at the bottom they were mechanically collected into a pile. The room banged with the noise of the conveyor. Metal arms reached and groped. "It looks like a Martian," Heinke said. "Or like Abe Merritt's The Metal Monster. I have that in the original edition. It was published in the October 1927 issue of Science and Invention under the title The Metal Emperor." "Yeah," Joe Mantilla said, not listening. "Nobody hardly knows that," Heinke went on, above the uproar. "Where was Art?" Joe Mantilla said. "I don't know. He was out." "If I was married to a girl like her," Joe Mantilla said, "I sure wouldn't be out." "That's no lie," Ferda Heinke said. They got their estimate and left the bindery. As they walked back to the car, Joe Mantilla noticed a flat manila folder under Heinke's arm. "Didn't you give him that?" "No," Heinke said. "What is it?" "A story," Heinke said, becoming instantly cautious. "What kind of story?" "Science fiction, of course. I wrote it all last week. It runs 500 words. He clutched the folder with both hands. "It's pretty good." "Let's see it," Joe Mantilla said. An evasiveness crept over Heinke. "No soap." "What's it for?" "I'm going to submit it to Astounding." "If they print it, everybody'll read it." Mantilla stuck out his hand. "Let's have it. Come on." Heinke stalled. "It stinks." "What's it called?" "The Peeping Man." "What's that mean?" Heinke struggled. "That's the lead character. He's a mutant with psionic powers. He can see into alternate Earths. The whole world is destroyed and in ruins, and he sees Earths in which there was no war. It's not exactly original, but it has a new twist." Joe Mantilla grabbed the folder from Heinke. "I'll give it back to you tomorrow. You can submit it then." "Give that back, you shit!" Heinke snatched it angrily. "Come on, goddamn you!" The two of them struggled, during which the folder was dropped, stepped on, picked up, dropped again. Joe Mantilla tripped Heinke, and Heinke fell sprawling, still trying to catch hold of his folder. "You—" Heinke yelled from the pavement. "Why don't you want me to see it?" Mantilla said, gathering up the crumpled sheets. "What's there that you don't want anybody to find out?" Sullenly, Heinke climbed to his feet. "When you show things to people you know," he brushed off his jeans, They always say it's about them. Is it about me? Hanky plodded along toward the car. A writer has to gather his materials where he finds them. Joe Mantilla gave him a swift kick in the rump. If it's about me, I'll deball you. And I'll sue you for assault and battery, and for theft of my manuscript. How about that? As he got into the Plymouth, he said, It's not about you. Who then? After a long time, Hanky muttered, It's about Rachel. Joe Mantilla snorted. God damn, that's a laugh. You've been thinking about her? It's about her and Art. No kidding. Seated behind the wheel, Joe Mantilla began to read the manuscript. The Peeping Man, a science fiction story by Ferda R. Hanky. Colonel Throckmorton's glance turned involuntarily in the direction of the triple-locked chamber around which armed soldiers in uniform with blasters kept a 24-hour vigil. No man had gone into that room. Earth's last hope was in that room, and the door was sealed. What thoughts went through the colonel's head? There was no turning back. They had gone too far. The room contained Earth's one hope for salvation from the ruins to which the Third World War between Russia and America had brought it. It's eerie, the colonel trembled. Is he a demon or a god? Sometimes I don't know which. I'll tell you, Lieutenant, I haven't closed my eyes in sleep in days. I hesitate to trust the fate of mankind to that being. We know nothing about him, Lieutenant. How can Homo sapiens understand Homo superior? It's beyond comprehension. But perhaps he can save us. The lieutenant's voice was quiet as he spoke. If he wants to. In the room sat a man. Head bowed, the man was thinking. His name? Ronald Manchester. He was 23 years old, and the psionic power within him had flowered at last to full bloom. But he was not thinking of that. He was thinking how he was the most powerful human in the world. Yet not a human, but an incredibly unique, godlike Superman who could save Earth. He was seeing past the mundane world in which ordinary man lived. He was seeing into an almost unbelievable other universe whose beauty was hidden to all save him. What did he see in that other universe? For to him it was manifest, alternate presence of other possible Earths that had not been wrecked by man's greed. They were inside his head. His mind was a space-time continuum that led from one Earth to the next, and his frontal lobe was trained on that miraculous salvation which he alone could see. Beautiful trees he saw and flowers, a great garden very much similar to the Garden of Eden. It was unspoiled by greedy man. Animals lay down with other animals. People walked around in peace and friendship. There was no strife. Ron saw all this, and he was sad, for he knew that man had destroyed his own world. Would man destroy this veritable garden of paradise? The heart of the Superman was troubled. He knew the greed of Homo sapiens. He was the beginning of a new race who lacked that selfish greed. And he had been imprisoned by soldiers because they hated and didn't understand anything different. He had been chased by a howling mob of mass men. He had been stoned and thrown sticks at. Beaten, troubled, he had at the end crept away from the haunts of man. He could not endure among them because he could not kill. He lacked the ability to destroy. He was like God. He loved everybody. He wanted to be friends. One day he was sitting alone in his cell, and he looked into a different other world of such breathtaking beauty that nobody could imagine it. Nobody could believe it existed. It was so fair and untouched. Even the man of tomorrow was stunned and for a time silent. He trembled and grew cold all over as his eyes made it out. A lovely forest pool rippled in the primeval glade. Animals disported themselves under mountains that rose against the sky. The sky was star-studded, and a moon of arresting beauty hung there, beaming down. Suddenly he saw something, a shape moving among the trees. He looked more closely. he saw a woman. The woman was a goddess. A large cat-like lion, whose fur was green instead of the usual, was sitting with her at the edge of an untroubled forest pool. The woman stared reflectively down at the water, and every now and then dabbled in it, sending ripples in ever-widening circles. The woman was nude. Her breasts rose in 2 cones that ended in pink roses that he saw with almost awe. On her face was a sad look, as if she was thinking. Then, one day, just before they were going to come and shoot him, the beautiful woman appeared. A blazing circle of blinding light appeared in the center of the cell, and there was the woman. "Come," she whispered. Her eyes were large and blue, and her lips were red. Her hair was a cascade of black down her bare neck and shoulders. Her legs shone long and bare in the light of the flaming circle in which she moved. "I will save you," were the words her lovely lips formed. "I will lead you to a world in which you can live." "Why?" was the other's instant query. Colonel Peterson might possibly appear at any instant. "I have fallen in love with you. I know your plight, superior mutant. But hurry." She seemed to glance into the view screen attached to her bare wrist. "Soldiers are coming. If I'm to save you, I must as soon as possible." Their telepathic brains met, and he saw what he had to do. He shinnied up the wall to the light globe. From it, he took the platinum atomic filament, an invention of the future that operated without power, and, ripping wires from the walls, he took his belt buckle and brought out the concealed microscopic tools he carried. He quickly made a machine under her telepathic direction. "Do you trust me?" her lips whispered. His rejoinder was, "Yes, my beloved, I trust you entirely. For you are not like the others. You are not like man." Suddenly there was a blinding flash of light. When the light cleared, he was lying on a grassy glade he knew so well. At first he couldn't believe he was there, because something in the way the woman talked gave him grave doubts. He wondered if she was not telling him something. Then she appeared. She wore a simple plain white robe looped at her waist. On her feet she had sandals. The cloth seemed to cling to her breasts, which were full and upright. Her body moved as she walked. "You are here," she said calmly. The strange smile on her face had grown. She led him stumbling from the glade down to the edge of a mountain. The sun blazed down on them, and temporarily he was blinded. When he opened his eyes, what he saw was impossible. He cried out, but there she was beside him. She sensed and knew. For what he saw was that he was still on Earth. There was the ruined cities, all broken and ruined, as he remembered them. It was the regular Earth. He was stunned. "This is your real world," the woman told him. She pointed with her bare arm out over the ruins at the foot of the mountain. "I have brought you back to it. I and you will rebuild together. We will not turn inward and shrink our terrible responsibility. We offer eternal hope to mankind, which deserves being rebuilt. With your ability and our money, we can help repair the damage bacteria and H-bombs did. Millions have died horribly. War has taken a ghastly toll. But do not despair of men. It was the military, not all men. I am a woman, you a man. We will help man, not turn our backs on them." He listened to her, and gradually a dawning discovery came to him. The point she was saying was this, that he had been wrong. He had taken the easy road, and the woman had helped him to see what he had to see. "And all the Colonel Peters?" he asked. "We have triumphed over them," was the answer as she stood beside him on the mountaintop. "They are no more. The power of goodness and love finally won out over war." Already, far below the two of them, the rebuilding had begun. They walked slowly to greet it. End. Joe Mantilla returned the manuscript and folder. "It sure is corny," he said. He started up the Plymouth. "No good. Ferdahinky agreed, discouraged. Is that what you mean? You don't think I ought to submit it? He knew in his own mind that the story was hopeless. Was that Rachel? Joe Mantilla said. That goddess? Yeah, he said. I don't get the ending. Ferdahinky said. The idea is that she was really a human being and not from some other universe. You mean like a Martian? A mutant. He thought she was a non-human mutant. Is that supposed to be Art? That whatever his name is? It's based on Art. What's he supposed to be? A mutant like her? That's what he found out, Ferdahinky said. He was a human being, too. His duty lay with mankind, not to himself. She showed him that. His duty was to rebuild the world. After a while, Joe Mantilla said, I sure wouldn't mind being married to her. You can say that again, Ferdahinky said. And you know, she's real smart. Yeah, he agreed. Joe Mantilla said, what do you think the purpose of life is? That's hard to say. Well, what do you think? You mean the ultimate purpose? What we're here on Earth for? Ferdahinky, pondering, said, to help mankind evolve up the next step in evolution. You think the next step is with us already? But we don't know it? Maybe so, he said. I used to think the purpose of life was to do God's will, Joe Mantilla said. How do you define God? God made the universe. Have you ever seen him? Hey, Joe Mantilla said. I read the story where the military shoots down this angel, you know, and it's wounded or something. He developed the plot for Ferdahinky's benefit, repeating the details endlessly. I read that, Ferdahinky said. Joe Mantilla said, it's funny all the different things she knows. Rachel, I mean. Maybe she really is a superior mutant. Gesturing, he went on. I wouldn't be surprised to discover that she has those powers mutants have. I mean, she's not like anybody else. When she says something, you know it's right. Maybe she has that faculty of, what is it? Reading the future? Precognition, Ferdahinky said. You think so? No, he said. That was the whole point of the story. She's actually a human being, and there's really a lot of human beings not like the military. If she was here now, Joe Mantilla said, and she heard us talking, you know what she'd do? She'd laugh. Yeah, Joe Mantilla said. You notice that most things like what other people like you and I believe, she don't believe? When you talk to her, she doesn't even hear you. Like all the different things we do, the organization and the beings from Earth. I think she really is a superior mutant, and after everybody else is gone, she'll take over the world. Ferdahinky said, I think this is the last dying days of our society, the way Rome went out. Why did Rome fall? Rome fell because their society became hollow. And then the barbarians swarmed in, and that was the end. They burned all the libraries and buildings, Joe Mantilla said. Tough, Ferdahinky said. That was wrong. They killed all the Christians. They walled them up in the catacombs and set animals on them. It was the Romans that did that, Ferdahinky said. In the gladiator fights, the Romans hated the Christians because they knew that the Christians would pull down their empty society, and they did. The Emperor Constantine was a Christian, Joe Mantilla disagreed. It was the barbarians who killed the Christians, not the Romans. They argued indefinitely. 17. The Four Aces Motel was a series of square stucco cabins, modern in appearance, Californian in style, well located at the edge of the highway entering San Francisco from the south. The neon sign was immense. The interior of each cabin was a dim chamber, and in the center of the chamber was the shower. After the paying guest had set down his suitcases and closed the door against the fatigue and glare of the drive, he looked about and saw the bed, clean, wide, and the lamp, brass and slender and amazingly tall. And then he saw the shower. And the guest stripped off his sweaty clothes, his flaxen shorts and sport shirt and shoes, and went happily into the shower. Under his bare toes the floor was a rough and sensuous porous stone, similar to limestone, but sprayed a pastel blue-gray. The walls, also porous and stone-like, were green. The shower was a part of the room, not an annex. A foot-high rampart of adobe blocks retained the water. The blocks were irregular, like the foundation of a ruined Spanish fort, and the guest felt as if he, or she, were standing in the center of some ancient, secure, unchanging structure, in which he or she was free to do what he liked, be what he wished. Beneath the shower of cabin C, Patricia Gray stood with her legs apart as she reached to scrub her ankles. The door of the cabin was partly open, and the late afternoon sunlight poured in through the slot. And in the sunlight, the image of gravel, a field of gravel, spreading to the square of lawn and deck chairs and beach umbrellas in the shade behind the neon sign. And then El Camino itself. The trucks and the San Francisco commuter traffic went nose to tail, and the noise was a deep, ceaseless drumming. Now they were leaving the city. Now, at this moment, at the end of the day, the traffic moved south. Over the bed, a plastic Emerson radio played a dance record. On the bed, Art lay spread out in his slacks and shirt, reading a magazine. "Do me a favor," Patricia said. "A towel?" "No," she said. "Turn off the radio, would you? Or get something else." The jukebox tunes reminded her of the station, her job, and Jim Briskin. Art made no move to get up. "Come on," she said. He did not stir, so she took the immaculate white bath towel supplied by the motel and patted across the room. Drizzling water from her hair and head and body, she clicked the switch of the radio. "Okay," she said. She was afraid enough of him to remain close to the radio as she dried herself. The silence seemed to oppress him. "Get something on it," he said. She said, "I don't want anything from the outside." This must be complete, she thought, if it is going to have any chance at all. From the clothes that she had bought him, she picked up a red and gray sports shirt. He had worn it once on the drive from San Francisco. Holding it, she went to the bed and said, "Can I wear this?" Glancing up, he saw her and the shirt. "Why?" "I just want to," she said. "It's too big." But she put on his shirt. The bottom of it trailed across her thighs. From one of her suitcases, she took a pair of jeans and put them on. She unfastened her hair and began to comb it. In the jeans and sports shirt, she padded about the room. She carried bottles and jars and tubes and packages to the medicine cabinet in the bathroom, and to the top of the dresser. The closet was already full of her clothes. She did not unpack the rest. There was no room. "You sure have a lot of stuff," Art said. "No," she said, "not so much." "All those bottles." She went into the tiny kitchen to see if there was cupboard space. They had brought no cooking utensils. On the drain board was a package of cookies and 4 navel oranges and a carton of milk and a loaf of Langendorf bread and a jar of cheese spread, and by itself a 5th of Gallo port. She opened the wine and, rinsing out the tumbler supplied by the motel, poured herself a glass. Through the back window of the motel, she saw a yard of planks and uncompleted concrete foundations. On a clothesline, trousers and work shirts hung. A desolate scene, she thought. Returning to the living room, she said, "This is nice here." At the front door, she stood watching the trucks go by. The time was 7 o'clock, and the sun was beginning to set. The flow of traffic had dwindled. They were already home, she thought, the commuters in their business suits and neckties. "When did you want to eat?" she said. "I don't care." "There's a coffee shop up the road," she said. "You want to go there?" He tossed aside the magazine. "Sure." As they walked along the shoulder of the highway, she said, "What's wrong?" "I don't know." "Do you want to drive on? Stop somewhere else? We could drive all night if you want." "You got your stuff unpacked." "I can repack it," she said. The door of the coffee shop was propped open. It was a wide, modern coffee shop, with a counter at one side and booths at the other. Cars were pulled up in the gravel lot beside it. Most of the people were from the motel, middle-aged men and women on their vacations. She thought from the east, from Ohio, coming out here to California for a week in their Oldsmobiles. At the counter, Art spun a stool and seated himself. He picked up the menu and examined it. "I'm hungry," she said. "I have an appetite. You know what I'd like to do? Let's ask them if they can fix the food to take out, so we can take it back with us." "What?" he murmured. "To our cabin, and eat it there." The waitress was before them. "Are you ready to order?" she said, swabbing the counter with a white cloth. Pat said, "Can you fix food to go?" Speaking in the direction of the cook, the waitress said, "Can we fix food to go?" "Depends on what they want," the cook said, appearing. "Salads, sandwiches, coffee. Not soup." "What about the dinner?" Pat said. On the menu they listed veal chops and green peas and potatoes. "If you have a plate," the cook said, "but we don't have any kind of cartons." "We can eat it here," Art said. He ordered 2 of the dinners. The waitress went off with the order. Pat said, "How do you feel?" "Fine," he said. The food arrived and they ate. "Is this what you wanted?" she said. "I mean, all of this. Where we are, what we're doing." He nodded. After they had eaten, they ordered beer. Nobody questioned him. He was served his bottle and glass. The beer was cold. The bottle was white with frost. "Let's go back to the cabin," Pat said suddenly. "Why?" "I don't know. These places, you can sit in them for hours." All the time she thought that she had sat with Jim in a bar and eatery like this at the edge of the highway, drinking beer, listening to the jukebox. Fried prawns and beer, the smell of the ocean, the hot night air of the Russian River. On the way back to the cabin, Art seemed resentful. She could not tell. Now the sun was gone, and the sky was dark. Beside her he was a dim shape plodding over the gravel. Bugs, perhaps moths, flew in their faces, and Art swiped wildly. "Do they bother you?" she said. "You darn right." She said, "Let's lock ourselves in. Let's stay inside and not come out." "Ever?" "As long as we can. The rest of the night until tomorrow. Let's go to bed early." They entered the cabin, and she closed the door. She bolted it and pulled down each of the window shades. The cabin was air-conditioned, and she turned on the fan. It roared, and the noise gratified her. "This is what I want," she said. She felt elated. This was complete. They had everything they needed. Finally, they were self-sufficient. Throwing herself down on the bed, she said, "Come and lie with me, please." "And do what?" "Just lie," she said. Begrudgingly, he sat down on the edge of the bed. "No," she said. "Don't just sit. Lie down. Why don't you? Isn't this what we ought to be doing?" Trying to explain to him what she meant, she said, "This just involves the 2 of us, lying here like this." Kicking his shoes off, he put his arms around her. Then he reached up to turn off the lamp above the bed. "No," she said. "I won't let you turn it off." "Why not?" "I want you to see me." "I know how you look." "Leave it on," she said. Arising, he left her. He went over and picked up his magazine and seated himself in a chair. "You are ashamed," she said. "You really are." He did not look up. "I wanted to look at you," she said. "Isn't that all right? Shouldn't I do that? I like the way you look." She waited, and then she said, "Could you leave on some light? The light in the bathroom, how about that?" His magazine under his arm, he went to the bathroom and turned on the lamp by the washbowl. Then he came back, and on his face was the fretful look. He reached past her head for the lamp. When it was off, he returned to the bed. The bed sank under his weight. At first, she saw nothing, and then she was able to make out the texture of his hair, the bridge of his nose, his eyebrows and ears. his shoulders. Lifting her hand, she unbuttoned his shirt. She slipped his shirt from him, and then she raised herself up and clasped her arms around him and pressed her head against his chest. He did not move. "Take off your clothes," she said. "Please, for my sake." When he had taken off his clothes, she lay beside him, her arm under his head. But there was no response. She slipped down until her dark hair flowed across his stomach, but still he did not stir. No, she thought, not at all. "This is fine," she said, "just lying here." "Okay," he said. She kissed him. His body was cold, hard, without spirit. "Can't we just lie here?" She unfastened her shirt, and then she took off her jeans. She lay against him with her mouth at his neck, her eyes shut. She buried her fists in his armpits, and she thought, never at all. "It's only around 8 o'clock, he said. "I love you," she said. "Do you understand what I mean? For God's sake." She dug her nails into his face and made him look at her. "I want to stay with you. This is exactly what I want, what we have now. This is enough." He said, "I'm not just going to lie around here." "What do you want? What do you need? Let's go somewhere." She held him down. She pressed down his wrists, his loins. She gripped him with her legs. She hugged him until her body ached and her breasts were bruised. "Where?" she said at last. He said, "I saw the skating rink up the road. We drove by it." "No," she said. "Come on," he said. With his hands he lifted her from him. He set her beside him in the bed. Getting to her feet, she began putting her clothes back on. "What sort of skating?" "Ice skating." "You want to go ice skating?" she said. She went away and put the palms of her hands to her chin. Her fingers covered her eyes. "I can't believe it, Art." "Why not?" he demanded. "What's the matter with that?" "Nothing," she said. "Don't you want to?" "No," she said. "I don't feel like it. I'll stay here." "Don't you know how?" "I'll teach you." He rose and rapidly dressed. "I'm pretty good. I taught a couple of people." She went into the bathroom and locked the door. "What are you doing in there?" he demanded at the door. "I don't feel well," she said. She sat down on the clothes hamper. "You want me to stick around?" "No, go ahead," she said. "I'll be back in an hour or so," he said. How about that? Okay?" She stared down at her hands. Presently she heard the front door of the cabin shut. Gravel crunched as he crossed the lot to the shoulder of the highway. Opening the bathroom door, she ran through the cabin and out onto the porch. Far off by the highway, his figure moved. He became smaller. "God damn you," she said. He went on. "God damn you, Art," she said. She shut the door. Putting on her shoes, she ran from the cabin across the gravel to the highway after him. Ahead of her, his figure moved, and then it was swallowed up by the lights of a roadside bar and then a gas station. She slowed down. The neon sign of the skating rink was visible, and she kept her eyes on that. She could not see him, but she saw the sign, and she went toward it. By the skating rink, cars were parked, some of them locked up, some still full of people. Kids, she thought. Boys in sport coats and slacks, girls in dresses. A lunch counter was attached to the rink, and the kids were going in there. At the window of the rink, a line of kids waited, and Art was one of them. In front of him was a girl in a checkered shirt and saddle shoes, a red wool sweater over her shoulders. The girl was no more than 15. Behind Art, a soldier, round-faced, gangling, waited with his girl. She stood, away from the light, gasping and getting back her wind. The line became longer. Art reached the window, paid for his admission, and then went on inside. A car full of teenagers pulled up, its exhausts thundering. Boys piled out and ran to the ticket window. Behind them, 2 girls in jeans and sweaters followed. At the window, they struggled and swarmed and shoved one another. The kids blended together, the jeans and shirts, the faces, the hair. When they had gone inside the rink, she turned and walked back to the cabin of the motel. She bolted the door after her. A roaring filled every part of the cabin, and at first she did not know what it was. She could not tell if it were inside or outside her head. It was outside. It was the air conditioner, she realized. They had left it on. With her drink in her hand, she stood before the mirror and declared with certitude that she would have looked absolutely perfect beside him. Together they would have attracted favorable attention. They would have been an outstanding couple. And then she began to cry. She started to sit down, but her hand struck the arm of the chair. The glass tumbled, and the remains of her drink spread in a pool across the rug. She touched the pool with her toe. The rug was wet. The coolness felt nice. God, she thought. Walking into the kitchen, she fixed herself another drink. She turned on the radio over the bed, but she could not get KOIF. The transmitter was too far away. On a San Mateo station, she picked up classical music. She turned the volume up loud as it would go. She brought the wine bottle to the bed. Lying down, she snapped off the light. She lay in darkness, drinking, listening to the music. Outside the cabin, cars and trucks passed along the highway. In the next cabin, laughter and voices shrilled out into the darkness. She listened to that, too. When the voices ceased, she turned her attention to the music. The music suddenly was gone. She sat up. At first, she tuned the dial, wondering what had happened to it, and then she realized that the station had gone off the air. The time was midnight. She made her way to the bathroom, washed her face, and then scrubbed her skin. She pressed her face into the fabric until her face ached. Then she came back out and seated herself by the phone. She dialed the KOIF number, but of course there was no answer. With a shock, she realized what she was doing. Not there, she thought, hanging up the phone. He couldn't possibly be there. Nobody was there. It was after midnight. The station was shut down. Holding the receiver in her lap, she dialed her own number. The phone rang on and on. Not there, she thought. She hung up. Next, she dialed his apartment. Again, there was no answer. Nowhere, she thought. She hung up the phone and went to refill her glass. The wine was almost gone. She poured it all into the glass. Once more she telephoned. Using the San Francisco phone book, she looked up and dialed the Emanuel's number, the apartment on Fillmore Street. "Hello," a voice said. "Jim?" she said. She began to cry. Tears spilled down her cheeks, onto her knuckles and the phone. "Where are you?" he said. "I'm in a motel," she said. "I don't know the name." Jim said, "Where is it?" "I don't know." She sat crying, clutching the phone. "Is he with you?" "No." From her pocket she got out her handkerchief and blew her nose. "He went out." Jim said, "See if there's a match folder. Look by the phone." She looked. She found a match folder with the name 4 Aces Motel on it. "Jim," she said, "I don't know what to do." "Did you find a match folder?" "No," she said, "I don't know." She buried the match folder in the phone book out of sight. "I know where I am, but I don't know what to do. He went out ice skating. Can you believe that?" "Tell me where you are," he said, "and I'll come get you. Are you in San Francisco?" "No," she said. "It's down on El Camino Real." "Near what town?" "Redwood City. He's up at an ice skating rink with a lot of kids. What's the matter with me, Jim? How do I get mixed up in this?" "Tell me the address." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Tell me," he said. "Pat, come on. Tell me where you are." "What am I going to do?" she said. "He's up there with those kids. All he is a kid. He showed me this place they go, this attic. He came over to the apartment and got me to go to dinner with him. We went out to Chinatown. I didn't want to go, but he got me to. I did everything I could, but good God, what can I do if he's going off and ice skate?" "Pat," he said, Tell me where you are. I'm scared of him, she said. Why? Holding the handkerchief to her eyes, she said, I don't want you to come down. How can I get out of here, Jim? I have to get away. This didn't work out. You were right. Why are you afraid of him? He hit me, she said, crying. Are you hurt? I'm okay. He hit me in the eye, and we went on and on that night until there was nothing left of me. He wore me out, and now he's ice skating. There was this girl ahead of him in the line. I want to come and get you, Jim said. So, tell me where you are. I can't get you unless I know where you are. She said, He's afraid of you, Jim. That's why we're down here. He was afraid you'd show up at the apartment. You're the only one he's afraid of. He isn't even afraid of Rachel. How is Rachel? Fine, he said. Is she mad? Look, he said, tell me where you are. I'm at the Four Aces Motel. Okay. Wait, she said. Jim, listen, I did everything I could. I bought him enough clothes so he looked like a man and not like a kid dressed up for Saturday night. It's my car we came down in. What else could I do? All I wanted to do was just lie here in bed and not do anything. But he wouldn't do that. I'll see you, he said, and hung up. The phone clicked in her ear. For a time she held it, and then she put it on the hook. Christ, she said. Now it had happened. Now it was over. She went unsteadily to the closet and changed from her jeans and sport shirt to a blouse and bolero and long skirt. He liked her long skirts. Then she began braiding her hair. At 12:30, the cabin door flew open and Art entered. Hi, he said. Hello, she said. What you been doing? He saw the empty wine bottle by the bed. What did you do, drink the whole bottle? She said, I called Jim Briskin. Yeah? He came around beside her. No kidding? I had to, she said. Why did you go off and leave me? I don't understand how you could. How long ago did you call him? I don't know. What's he doing, coming down? Yes, she said. By degrees, his face darkened. Get your stuff packed. Let's go. I'm going back, she said. Oh, yeah? Standing up, she said, You sneaky little kid. If he ever gets his hands on you, he'll kill you. So you better run as fast as you can and hide. What did you call him for? Ice skating, she said. What else do you do? Why don't you go out and get me an ice cream soda? He shuffled his feet and stuck his hands away into his back pockets. Did you have fun? She said. Did you meet any kids you knew? No, he said. Why'd you leave? They closed. Did you walk some girl home? Or what did you do, buy a hot dog and a malt? She felt cold and terrified. She did not dare stop. Art said, I tried out this guy's MG. Then you go drive his MG, she said. You just drive it as long as you want. Are you really going back? He said in a plaintive voice. We just left. Blame yourself, she said. Fooling with his belt, he said, I couldn't see sitting around. With me, she said. You couldn't see sitting around with me. There's nothing to do, he said. From the closet, she got her suitcases. Will you help me pack? She began putting skirts and sweaters and blouses into the suitcase. Come on, Art. Don't make me do all the work. Going to her purse, he began rooting. What do you want? She walked over and took the purse from him. The car keys, he said, not looking directly at her. Why? I can't hang around here. You can't take my car. If you want to leave, go ahead. Go catch a bus or something. In an instant, he had yanked the purse from her hands. Holding it over the bed, he dumped out the contents. I'll leave it off someplace, he said. You'll get it back. She said, If you take my car, I'll call the police and tell them you stole it. You will? It's my car. She held out her hand. Give me back the keys. Can't I use it? No, she said. Suppose I just take it up to San Francisco and leave it off. I don't want to run into Jim Briskin. He's probably sore as hell. He'll kill you, she said. Did he say so? Yes, she said. It was your idea. She put her hand up to her eye. See what you did to me? After a long, uncertain pause, he said, You got a couple of bucks I could have? I mean, if I have to get a bus or something? Did you spend everything you had? I paid for some gas, he said, for this guy's MG. From the contents of her purse, she took her wallet. I'll pay you back, he said. She gave him $6 or $7, and he put the bills away in his coat. You better leave, she said, before he gets here. She led him by the arm. His body responded sluggishly, and at the door he hung back, dragging, unwilling to go. I'm not leaving, he said. I don't believe you called Jim Briskin. That's a lot of hot air. Tugging away from her, he walked back and stopped by the kitchen door, his shoulders hunched. Suit yourself, she said. She continued packing. She collected the bottles and jars and packages and fitted them into the suitcases. Is he really coming? Art said. Yes, she said. You're going back with him? Yes, she said. I hope so. Are you going to marry him? Yes, she said. His chin sank down. His body hunched until he looked like a little old man, a gnarled old gnomish fellow, nearsighted, hard of hearing. He strained to hear her, to gather his faculties. The youthfulness was gone, the purity. What's so good about him? He said. He's a very fine person. And you're a skinny old bag. Lifting the suitcase from the bed, she carried it to the door and set it down. That was one of them, and she began on a second. But it did not seem worth it. She sat down on the bed. Just an old bag, Art said. Why don't you get a cat or a parrot or one of those birds the old maids have, so you can have something to mother? Art, she said, would you go outside and leave me alone? Please, leave me alone. You're not a girl at all, he said. You're dried up. You're all worn out. Stop it, she said. Tough, he said, immobile. She got up and went outside onto the porch of the cabin. Headlights of cars flashed by. She walked toward the highway, closer and closer until under her feet the gravel was gone and she had come onto the pavement. A car honked. Behind it a second car slowed and swerved. The distorted features of the driver were visible. And then the car vanished. Its taillight glowed red. The taillight became smaller, and then, at last, it was gone. After a while, a car left the highway and bumped across the shoulder. Its headlights fastened on her, and she was blinded. The car grew, and she put up her hands. She smelled the hot engine as the hood of the car passed in front of her. The door opened. The car stopped rolling. Is that you, Pat? Jim Briskin's voice came. Yes, she said. She lifted her head. Inside his car, behind the wheel, he sat with the door open, peering at her. When he had recognized her, he got out. How are you? He said, as they walked toward Cabin C. He patted her on the back. I'm pretty good, she said. You look run down. Halting her, he scrutinized her. He really hit you, didn't he? Yes, she said. Ahead of her, he stepped up and into the cabin. Hello, Art, he said. Hi, Art said, flushed and nervous. Jim said, What did you do, hit her in the eye? Yeah, Art said, but she's okay. Turning to Pat, he said, Let's have your car key. He looked all around the room as she got the keys from the heap of things on the bed. Thanks, he said. He seemed preoccupied. Here, Art. He tossed the keys to the boy. What's this? Art said. The keys fell to the floor, and he stooped to pick them up. The key slipped away from him, and he stooped again. Your stuff isn't packed, is it? Jim said to her. I see it all around. No, she said. I have one suitcase packed. Going over to Art, he said, You finish packing your stuff. Put it in the Dodge, and then come on up. Up where? Art said. Leave the car in front of her place. He led Pat from the cabin. You want me to unpack it? Art said, following after them to the door. When I get it up there? No, Jim said. Leave everything in the car. What about the keys? put them in the mailbox. Holding Pat by the hand, he took her to his car. As they drove out onto the highway, she said, "Will he do it?" "Do you care?" Jim said. She said, "Thanks for coming." "I think that ends it." Behind them, the Four Aces Motel was already lost among the neon signs. "How are you otherwise?" "I'll live," she said. "It was certainly hard getting the name out of you, the motel name." After that, neither of them said anything. They watched the road, the cars and signs, the headlights that flashed by. Leaning back against the seat, Pat slept a little. When she woke up, they were on the freeway. To the right was the bay. Now there were fewer lights. "That dirty little squirt of a kid," she said. "Okay," he said. "He socked me right in the eye. He knocked me out." "Now you have something to talk about," he said. "Something you can point to." "And he pulled a knife on Bob Posen." Jim said, "Who cares?" She shrank away. She found her handkerchief in her pocket and began to cry into it, her head turned away from him. She cried as quietly as possible. "Don't listen to me," he said. "No," she said. "You're right." He reached over and caressed her arm. "Why don't you shut up? Nobody feels sorry for you. When we get into town, we'll stop and buy something for your eye." "I don't want anything," she said. "You know what he called me? He called me a lot of terrible things. I haven't heard words like that since I was a child. And he wanted me to borrow on my car. He wanted—" Again she was crying. She could not help it. She cried on, and Jim Briskin paid no attention. The freeway joined with other freeways leading into San Francisco. In due time, they were driving above houses. Most of the houses were dark. Their lights were off. 18. His apartment was cold and dark. Patricia remained by the door while he lit lamps and pulled down the window shades. "Haven't you been here?" she asked. "Not for a while." In the light he saw how really tired she was, how lined and unhappy her face had become. A careworn face, he thought. "Better sit down," he said. Pat said, "You know, at first he drove me wild. He was always after me." "You said that first night was terrific," he said. "Yes." She nodded, sitting with her hands folded, her feet close together. "But the next night, after he hit me, it went on and on. My God, I thought I'd die. He kept coming back. I'd think he was asleep. Maybe he was for a little. And then there he'd be, wanting to start again." She glanced up timidly. "So we kept at it. And in the morning when I woke up, I was sore all over. I could hardly get out of bed." "Get a good long rest," he said. "It's awful to say," she said. "To tell you." He gestured. "Why not?" "Can I have a cup of coffee? I drank a bottle of wine. I feel sick." She did look sick, but he had seen her a lot sicker. All in all, she was lucky. "Sweet wine?" he said. "Port." "You kind of dropped your guard. Did you want it to break up?" "Yes," she said. "It had run its course." He knelt down so that he was facing her, taking hold of her hands. He said, "Is that the slogan?" Her lips moved. "I don't know. What do you mean, Jim?" "What now?" he said. "Now," she echoed, "I realize my mistake." He left her and went into the kitchen to fix the coffee. When he came back, she was still sitting with her feet tucked under her, and her hands folded in her lap. How forlorn, he thought. How glad he was to get her back. The difference it made, the importance. Giving her the coffee cup, he said, "You think I don't love you as much as that kid loves you, or said he loves you?" "I know you do." "Will you marry me?" he said. "Again?" Now, he thought, if ever she could be persuaded, it would have to be now. "You're through with that, and you don't give a damn about Bob Posen, do you?" "All right," she said, holding her coffee cup. "I'll marry you, remarry you, whatever they call it." The cup tilted. He took it away and set it on the floor. The giving in, he thought. the surrendering on the part of the woman he completely loved. There was nothing like it on earth, nothing until the sky rolled up like a scroll and the graves opened and the dead walked, until, he thought, the corruptible man put on incorruption. "You won't change your mind, will you?" he said. "Do you want me to?" "I don't want you to change your mind." "All right," she said. "I won't." Looking at him steadily, she said, "You don't consider me used up, then?" "Are you?" The tears rose up in her eyes and spilled out. "I don't know." "It's unlikely." "You don't want me," she said, tears pouring down her cheeks onto her collar. "You mean I shouldn't? Is that what you're trying to say?" He lifted her up out of the chair. "Or you mean I should plead and beg? Which is it?" She tried to speak. Helplessly clutching at him, she said, "I don't feel well. Take me into the bathroom, please." Half carrying her, he got her there. She refused to let go of him. Holding on to her, he let her be sick. For a minute or so she passed out, but almost at once she recovered. "Thanks," she whispered. "God." He lowered her until she was sitting on the rim of the tub. Wan and shivering, she rubbed his hand with her palm. She seemed feverish, and he wondered if she were really sick. "No," she said, "I'm feeling better. It's psychological." "Let's hope so." She smiled brokenly. "My conscience. I told him we would have to pay. This is it, maybe." When she was stronger, he washed her face and led her back to the living room. Removing her shoes, he wrapped her in a blanket and propped her up on the couch. "It was the coffee," she said. "You didn't drink any." She wanted a cigarette. As he lit it for her, he said, "You want me to go see if he brought your stuff up?" "I'm not staying here," she said. "I want to be in my own place. I don't want to be anywhere but there." "Suppose he shows up?" "He won't," she said. "No," he agreed, "I guess not." "I'll stay with you," she decided. "I can't go back to that, the evasion, the way we were. I'll stay here, and then, when we're married, we can stay here or there, whichever you want. Or we can get a new place. That might be better." "I think so," he said. As he put his coat on, she said, "I'll go with you, so I can see it and get what I need. We could go get the Dodge and bring it here. We could unload the stuff here." They sat around until she felt well enough, and then they drove to her apartment. The Dodge was parked at the entrance. Inside the back, her stuff was piled helter-skelter. Art had dumped it in, and the hell with it. Bottles, clothes, shoes, even the carton of milk and the oranges and the loaf of Langendorf bread, and on the floor the empty wine bottle. "Anyhow," Pat said, "it's probably all here." He parked his car, and then he drove the Dodge, with Pat beside him, back to his own place. To bed, she wore a pair of red and white polka-dot pajamas. "I feel new," she said, "in these." In his shorts, he brushed his teeth at the washbowl in the bathroom. The time was 3:30. Except for the bedroom and bathroom, the apartment was dark. The door was locked, and the lights were off. In the bed, Patricia lay smoking, an ashtray on the covers. "You finished in there?" Jim said, coming out of the bathroom. "Yes," she said, feeling content. How lean he was, she thought, in his shorts. To her, the sparse torso and arms and legs were a relief. For 3 days she'd been held fast by a thick-limbed boy whose body dwindled from the loins down, a rubbery, boneless body made up of muscles and fat, supported on legs too short. A boy's body, she thought, not at all like this. Switching out the light, Jim removed his shorts and got into the bed. In the darkness, he put his arms around her. "Isn't it strange?" she said. "Now we're back again. After 2 years. Nothing separating us, nothing holding us apart." She was very happy. It was all for some purpose, she thought. It had ended in this. So it made sense. Not merely wasted motion, fatigue and injury for nothing. Beside her, Jim said, "You want to hear about Rachel?" "Is there something?" She was almost asleep. But now, in her peace, she felt a coldness. Seeping into her, the coldness grew. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, "you knew I was there. You called me there." She said, "I called you everywhere. I called you at the station, and at your place, here, and at my place. And then I called you there." "I was there." "Does it mean anything?" She was wide awake, staring up into the darkness. "She asked me to stay with her, until Art showed up, so I did." She waited, but that was all. He was silent. "Did you live there?" she asked finally. "Is that what you mean?" "Not exactly. She's peculiar." "How?" "It was mostly meals. She wanted me to be there when she came home, so she could cook for me." "Peasant," Pat said. "Dinner table, the farm." "I hung around in the evening until she went to bed, and then I left." "What about in the morning?" 2 mornings, she thought. Nothing. "Are you telling me the truth?" she said. "Of course I am." She said, "I'm scared of Rachel." "I know you are." "Will she do anything?" "She has Art back." "Yes," she said, encouraged. "That's right." She rose to put out her cigarette. "What do you think of her?" "I don't know." Lying back, Pat said, "Maybe she'll stab him." Jim laughed. "Maybe. Maybe he'll beat her up." "What would you do if he beat her up?" "It's not my business." "How would you feel?" He did not answer. She waited. She listened. Had he gone to sleep? To herself she said, "I paid for what I did. I was sick in the bathtub. Isn't that enough? Doesn't that do it?" On the bedroom floor was her package of cigarettes, and she reached to pick them up. She lit another cigarette and lay on her back smoking. The man beside her did not stir. He was asleep, she thought. He was. This is perfect, she thought. I see that. I understand that. Don't I deserve it? End of Side 5. To continue, turn the cassette over.